Right, hello and welcome to the first episode on my channel for the Gfinity Elite Series, CSGO Weekly Roundup. As most of you should know by now, the Gfinity Elite Series kicked off on Friday the 7th of July. Started off with some Street Fighter action, which was one of the 3 games selected as part of the Elite Series, alongside Rocket League and obviously the main talking point of these videos, Counter-Strike Global Offensive. We're going to jump straight into it. So obviously for the first match that took part, it was Method versus Excel. Method, the former FM esports roster. Many people will think going into it and even beforehand that Method did have the best UK lineup, based upon previous results which they did achieve with FM, and alongside you kind of look through the roster and it is an experienced roster, it is a very talented roster, against an Excel side who again they've got a decent amount of experience there, obviously with likes of Windansky, Bosta and Jacob in particular, and then obviously you've got good firepower in Connor and Luzza kind of rounding that roster out. So going into it, so obviously map wise, Method were the ones that did end up picking Nuke, and Excel did pick Mirage. Method did take the 16-11 victory on Mirage. It was a bit many close rounds in it, to be fair. Luzza coming up with some vital kills, to be fair, for the XL side, but overall, to be fair, it was a good map to watch. I mean, from Method's perspective, as far as I'm aware, Jenko was feeling rather ill, which was the cause of why there was an early break in the first map. So obviously it's never the most ideal if you're kind of feeling a bit shaky, feeling a bit ill. It's never the best of scenarios for you. So obviously hopefully he is okay. But from that point, after the Mirage victory for Method, went into Nuke, and to be fair to Excel, they had a relatively comfortable victory on Nuke. It all seemed relatively smoothly, as you can kind of go from the match stats, which are obviously taken from HLTV. If you look through the Excel side, I mean, it was a fairly consistent performance from all of them. It was a team effort, it was a collective effort. And then obviously on the Method side, you do see a bit more disparity in the KDs in particular. Not that KDs are everything before people jump on the bandwagon of this, but I mean, you do see it a bit more spread out, and as you can kind of see, Weber with the kind of plus 10 KD there, in comparison to say like Pulse's negative 13. I think Pulse even himself on social media did come out and say that he wasn't too best pleased with his own performance. But look, at the end of the day, it's the first week. I'm probably going to say this on most people's results, to be fair, but look, it's the first week. Things happen. At the end of the day, from this point onwards, they know they need to work on it. The first week's over and done with, so they can kind of just hopefully get into their stride of things going forward. But overall, I'd say Excel will be pretty happy with the result. I mean, obviously they're going to want to win every single game, and to be fair, Excel are definitely up there as one of the teams that I definitely think can definitely take some decent results throughout this Elite Series. Method probably a bit unhappy in terms of they would have probably wanted that 2-0 victory. But at the same point, it is against a very talented lineup, so I don't think they'll be overall too disappointed in the fact of by losing a map it was to a good team. So we'll move on to the second game of the day, which was the Prophecy versus Endpoint fixture, which overall, obviously the 2 maps that were picked, Prophecy ended up picking up Train and Endpoint picking up Overpass. Overall, it was a fairly, first map especially, it was a comfortable victory for Prophecy. Endpoint didn't really get the ball rolling on Train to kind of pick up any decent results from it. Moving on to Overpass, Endpoint did. They were showing a lot of better signs, and they kind of just let it slip later towards in the game. Again, obviously going before it, I mean, Prophecy was a kind of a roster that people were going to be a bit unsure of how they were going to do. I mean, they're kind of been clustered up together essentially, and it's a very international lineup, of course, so people going into it weren't too sure what to kind of expect, although most people going into it did expect the EU teams to kind of come up trumps, so obviously the Prophecies and the Epsilons in particular. Endpoint, though, obviously very talented lineup: Cryptics, Imi, Max, Jesp and Pickles. The one thing I always say kind of with regards to Endpoint is just there is always that bit of inconsistency. Like one match they can literally show up and they can be the world's best team, and in the next match it just doesn't quite go their way. So I mean, they'll probably be thinking in kind of more so than anyone out of this week's fixtures that they're going to need to obviously make sure in this kind of week one, let's just kind of forget it, move on, go forward. So obviously hopefully they can kind of pull something out the bag in the next week's fixtures. Like I said, it is a very talented lineup, and they do have the ability to take the victories over various teams within this Elite Series. Overall, going into it, I mean, looking through the KDs again, some very good performances from the Prophecy side. In terms of coming up, Kolar, especially some of the AWPing that I was seeing from him, pulled off some very good shots and some smart play. Endpoint overall, like I said, you're looking at the KD wise, again, KD's not everything, don't get me wrong, but yeah, I mean, it was just the best way to probably put it, it was just a day to forget for the Endpoint lads. Hopefully they can smash it going forwards. Moving on to third match of the week, which was obviously Envious Academy versus the Infused lineup. Infused going into it, obviously this week they did not have Fryer 1, they had Trials filling in, which Trials look very good player coming up. Definitely kind of feel like fair play to him for getting his chance to kind of his chance to shine. Looking through the Infused lineup, obviously Red Snake very, very experienced. Aaron 6 months ago, I think Snods and whatnot said the same in casting. Many people thought he was definitely the best UK player at that point. Didn't have the best of games for himself. MCK or Mick, obviously talented player, shown it various times. Trials then coming through and obviously Eccles himself, inexperienced, but at the same point he's worked himself up well enough to get the opportunity that he has now. Going into it, obviously against the Envious Academy team, I mean, people within the French scene were obviously quite highly rating this Envious Academy. I guess a lot of UK players and teams might not have necessarily known too much about them going into it. Hadji in particular did come up, like, play very, very well, especially on Cobble, and then on Inferno in particular, seeing like some of the stuff, like watching how aggressive players like Lambert were playing. And I think, to be honest, Envious probably picked up on that, on a bit of inexperience of the kind of cohesion from the Infused lineup. It did look a bit shaky, it didn't look that organised in various scenarios throughout both map picks, obviously Cobblestone and Inferno. If I'm not, yes, obviously as HLTV, the wonderful image does state for this. Envious did pick Inferno and Infused pick Cobble. It was a 16-5 victory to Envious on Cobble, and it was a 16-9 victory to Envious on Inferno. Overall, I think kind of a week to forget for the Infused lineup. I'm sure many things that they planned to do didn't necessarily go their way, and obviously with Trials coming in comparison to Fryer 1, then obviously the cohesion, the teamwork probably wasn't there as much as they would have liked it to have been. Overall though, I mean, look, I think that Infused lineup is still definitely talented to more than compete throughout this Elite Series, but definitely a good showing from Envious Academy, and obviously they're showing one of the big reasons as to why they are one of the favourites to win the Elite Series. So moving on to the last game of the night, and this one was the intriguing one of them all. So the Epsilon versus Reason 1, obviously a lot of hype was made about Smooya, even in the Elite Series kind of production videos that they've done. Obviously you've got good old Smooya obviously saying in terms of that he's pretty sure, he's very confident that no teams are really going to be able to touch them, especially from the UK. Obviously a bit of rivalry in between Thomas and Smooya in particular. Obviously great friends outside of the game, but obviously competing in this particular scenario. And yeah, I mean, after first map, it looked a bit shaky for Reason, not going to lie. Reason were the ones that did pick Overpass, and Epsilon picked Cobblestone. It was a 16-2 victory to Epsilon on Overpass. Now, watching this, and I mean, it was a pretty destructive performance from the Epsilon side. They were playing aggressive. Reason couldn't really find a way around it. It was very smooth sailing throughout the map in fairness, but the one thing that I will give major props to for Reason for this is the fact of that they've taken that initial L from the first map, but they've still had the strong enough mentality to be able to come back and fight back in that second map. Obviously on the Cobblestone in particular, like Cinder came up trumps. He was holding drop for large periods, especially obviously on CT side, and he won a lot of important rounds for the Reason lineup in that. Cray as well came up with various massive frags, but it was definitely a collective effort from them guys. So props to Reason for kind of managing to kind of get that 1-1 victory. Everyone kind of wrote them off before the game, thinking it was going to be a relatively comfortable, easy 2-0 for the Epsilon lineup. So mass props to Reason. I definitely think they are one of the teams that that people shouldn't underestimate going into it. So some very talented players in that, and they genuinely really want to kind of perform people, prove people wrong. So I'm delighted that they did manage to kind of pull that back and pull out the 1-1 overall. So obviously that was going to be the kind of overall summary of week 1, what happened. Going into week 2, I think we'll see a lot of changes. I mean, on a side note of other things, obviously certain people were saying about the kind of viewership numbers for the Elite Series, probably peaking at around 1,500 viewers for I think it might have been the Envious game. But look, I mean, overall viewership, sure, we want it to be better. I do think certain things that could be done better from a marketing and PR standpoint from a Gfinity side of it. Didn't obviously help in the fact that ESL 1 Cologne was on at the same point, so that is going to coincide, but at the same point I'm sure over this 9-week period there are obviously going to be various tournaments and matches going on at the same point. But look, at the end of the day, as much as I've pointed it out myself in various things that I'm not the biggest fan of the way Gfinity have approached things, but we all need to make that collective effort to kind of put in the views, to attend it, to kind of be speaking about it, tell people that don't necessarily know about it, because of everyone's been moaning in the UK scene for so long that there's not enough like structure, there's not enough tournaments, there's not enough money, and obviously lo and behold that opportunity's come along, and people are still, obviously the players that are within it and partaking in it are all happy, they're glad that they're partaking in it, but people that aren't seem to still be quite negative about the whole thing from a player perspective. So I do think that mentality needs to change. Like I said, there's certain things we're not all going to agree on with the way Gfinity have done certain things, but at the same point we have to support it. No, nothing's going to be perfect straight away. So obviously all I will say is just please try and give it a chance. Obviously tune in, watch as much as you can, help yourself get those viewership numbers up, and hopefully it will have a good long-term effect on the UK Counter-Strike scene. Either way, that will be the end of week 1 for the CSGO Roundup. I will be doing a week 2 one soon enough. Obviously I have planned to do similar things for this regarding, say, like the ESEA seasons, as well as UK Masters and ESL. UK Premiership, so we will see what happens with that. But obviously other than that, remember to like, comment, subscribe, hate, whatever it is you feel like doing today, gents, and I will see you soon. Peace.